This week on Half Step Down, Jose shows some empathy. I wouldn't ask you to play drum solo if your arm fell off. Renee describes a world with no live music.
We're not having fun. Like, this isn't fun.
And the boys describe the magic that is Ringo Starr. Who wants to hear Yellow Submarine? So I'm going to play it.
Guys, anyone?
Settle in, boys and girls, because this is a long one. Half Step Down starts now.
Let's get this started. Well, we already started, right? I have a question for you. Are you familiar with the alternative rock band Angels and Airwaves?
Yes, that's Tom DeLonge's other band.
Tom DeLonge's Alien band, right? So, have you heard any of their music before?
I have, but I don't remember any of it.
Okay,
to be completely honest.
All right, you're familiar with Blink-182's Tom DeLonge's voice, though, right?
Oh yeah. 100%.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you an interesting story that happened to me this morning. I woke up. I stood up late last night. I'm doing a bunch of stuff to, I got to catch up on some things. So I went to bed kind of late. So this morning I figured it's Friday. Let me get up a little later. My phone was going off at about 7:45 in the morning. It was my sister, and I kind of ignored it. And then she called me a second time, and then I realized, I was like, oh, I missed the second call. But then she texted me right away. So at first my impression was, something's wrong, right?
Right.
And so, but she sends me a voice memo. So for you guys who don't have iPhones, you can record. Well, I'm sure you can do it with. With Androids, but you can record instead of typing a message. You can just record your voice and just send it directly through that message, right? Through
the voice memo,
wherever you're talking. Yeah, a voice memo. So it was an Angels and Airwaves song, and I was like, why is my sister sending me an Angels and Airwaves song? And let alone, why is my sister listening to Angels and Airwaves, right? That's not, from what I know of my sister for the last 32 years that I've known her, that's not her style of music.
Right.
And then right after, she texts me right after and she says, this singer, you remind me of this singer when you used to sing in your band. And it was like 8:15 in the morning and I'm laughing, right? I'm like, dude, you're telling me that I sound like Tom DeLonge from Angels and Airwaves when I was in my pop punk band, Angels.
There it is.
I was in my
See
pop
what
punk
happened.
band, Normandie.
Yeah.
And I said, oh gosh, and I couldn't believe it. So about an hour later, I'm sitting down having some coffee with my mom from a distance, and I said, hey mom, I said, Sally tells me that I sound like this guy, and I play it for her, and I'm laughing, and she like kind of leans in and she's listening. And she says, yeah, you kind of do sound like that guy.
I hate to break it to you, man, but you kind of did.
Oh, stop. I do not sound like Tom DeLonge from Angels and Airwaves.
That guy is a multi-platinum singer, man. I would just take it.
I guess that's a good... I guess I should take it as a compliment, right?
I would.
Yeah. Well, on that note, welcome everyone to Half Step Down, a music podcast where we create soundtracks for any given situation. I am your host, Renee Grano, and with me is Jose Martinez.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Jose, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Not bad at all, man.
Dodgers got a win for you today.
Nice
2-1
big win, dude.
Nice big win. Looking good. Good. I'm not, as the audience should know, I'm not by this point, I'm not a Dodger fan. I am a baseball fan. So that was a good game to watch. It was interesting. Jose, why don't you go ahead and give the audience a little more information about what the show's about and what the topic is this week?
Well, as you know, guys, every week we try to come up with a new situation, something fun, something interesting, and come up with a playlist or a soundtrack for it. This week, we decided to kind of look inward, right? So both Renee and I, we play instruments. Renee's a guitar player. I'm a drummer. We both dabble in other instruments, but those are our main ones. And we thought it would be fun to talk about the songs that we first learned when we first started playing our respective instruments. Because there's no better feeling than learning a song the first time and finally nailing it, whether it's by yourself or in a band. So we figured we'd talk about some of these first songs we learned.
Yeah, I was really excited when we decided to do this because I think this is going to give our audience a little more a little more retrospect on who we are as people instead of just the great hosts of the Half Step Down podcast.
Yeah, debatable, but we'll see.
What's debatable? The fact that we're good hosts, or
yeah, I was gonna say I think we're as good a host for a free podcast as you can get.
Yeah, especially when you say for podcast,
free podcast. See?
Yeah,
free podcast.
So before we got on the list, I think we have some honorable mentions to talk about today, right?
Why don't we go through our lists? We'll name them all, and then we'll go break down what we do normally. So why don't you go through your list first?
Why don't you go through yours first? Let me grab mine.
Okay, so my list goes as follows. So I got Enter Sandman by Metallica. I've got Superficial Love by TSOL. I have another Metallica song. We got One. Everlong by the Foo Fighters. Punk Guy by NoFX. Basket Case by Green Day. And Rock the House by the Gorillaz. The last two being my honorable mentions, but I'm sure we'll talk about them more when we get in the actual list.
That's a good list. That is a Jose playlist if I ever thought of one, and it would definitely fit 2 Metallica songs.
Yeah, there's definitely a reason for that, and we'll get into that when we get there.
So mine, we're gonna start off with "Damn It" from Blink-182 of the Tom DeLonge fame, because apparently I sing just like Tom DeLonge. "Sugar" by System of a Down. "Decoration" by the Early November. You have to throw some Early November in there. I have "Eleanor Rigby" by the Beatles. And then I have "Hit or Miss" by New Found Glory. And 2 honorable mentions for me this time. It's going to be "Drive" by Incubus and "Above Me" by Rufio.
All right. Let's jump right in. Let's go with one of yours first. Let's go with "Damn It" by Blink-182, man. Like, talk to me about learning that. What was that all about?
So I first picked up the guitar when I was 10, 11 years old, and I was forced to play. I was forced to play the guitar. I wanted to play the drums like my cousin Jose. That's what I wanted to do. And my dad said, "Nope, you're going to play the guitar." And I remember crying my whole way to the music shop to pick up my guitar to take lessons. And the first song I ever learned when I first went to the music school, the first song they taught me was "Damn It." He had asked me, "What kind of music do you like to listen to?" And I said Blink-182, Green Day. And then he goes, "I'm going to teach you "Damn It" by Blink-182. But he taught me not in power chords, but he taught me in chord progression. So that was my first experience with chord progressions as soon as I came about. And then I've always been a big Dude Ranch fan. Blink-182's Dude Ranch is one of those records that got me into punk rock. And I remember when Enema of the State came out, I bought the Dude Ranch album after Enema of the State, and I said, "Man, this thing's awesome," because I feel like Dude Ranch was a little more punk rock than or more pop punk than Enema of the State was, right? I feel like that was more mainstream, right? More mainstream rock, I guess you could say.
Do you mean he taught you like in open chords, like?
Yeah, like in open chord progressions. Okay. Yeah, like no power chords. It was a C and a D yeah. So that was pretty interesting. Like looking back at it now, but I still play. I play it the regular way, but I also like to do the open chord way with my acoustics sometimes, just because I like to be what some of the folks call extra, because I just like to be that way when I play the guitar.
And just a lot of the time, that's good quality to have sometimes, though.
Yeah. Sometimes it's good, right? It all just depends on the situation.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Right. Yeah. But this is one of those songs. I feel like anybody that picks up a guitar, especially in those times, in those days, Blink-182 and Green Day were going to be bands that you were going to pick up and learn how to play right away, right? I mean, they were pretty easy to learn. So
yeah, I think I learned how to play that song on guitar. It's one of the first ones you learn. It's a pretty simple little riff, and once you get that kind of little opening riff down, you've kind of got the whole song. And it definitely rode that wave of that late 90s punk rock kind of resurgence. When did that come out? 97, I'm looking at.
90s, yeah. No, you know what? Blink-182, I saw this really interesting documentary on the rise and fall of pop punk, and how pop punk started in the early 90s, and how Green Day was kind of their own style of punk rock. and how a lot of these old school punk rockers hated the fact that pop punk was around. They would call it, it wasn't punk rock. But Blink-182 definitely started that wave. They're one of them and Green Day, I think, were the bands that really started that wave of pop punk that led into like the mid 2000s, and then that kind of just died out and landed into emo music and hardcore and all that stuff. And then that resurged into like '09 pop punk, which was totally like more angsty, more, talked a little more darker themes and stuff. But, it's definitely been cool waves. And it's definitely been a little more complicated. As a musician, I appreciate when music becomes a little more complicated to learn. And so this is definitely one of those songs that is easy to learn when you first start off, and it's always fun to play.
Yeah, I know. I think the thing with Green Day, from what I remember, is that they were considered like a legitimate punk band until they started breaking out and becoming super popular, and then they were just kind of shunned.
So basically, once Dookie came about,
they were just kind of like thrown away. But I think that happened to a lot of bands in the genre, like The Offspring and like Rancid and all these guys. Once they started being played all over the radio, like the old school punk guard just kind of like, well, you guys aren't punk rock anymore.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing. I think we've talked about punk rock just being kind of weird in terms of, bands that old school punk rockers think are lame sometimes sonically are more abrasive than the bands that they think are legit. So it's really just about the attitude and honestly, just people being mad that a band is successful sometimes, I feel.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I can understand, looking back, I can understand why these old school punk rockers hated these, the style of pop punk, right? Like Green Day and Blink and all that stuff. But if you look forward, for example, like when you listen to The Greatest Generation by the One Years, right? That is pop punk at its finest, but it's a different style. And I think that hits more of an older punk rock style than what you would imagine pop punk to be. Because I think that was something that you thought about too. It's like, oh, this is just going to be like a generic pop punk album. But I feel that over the years, it's definitely evolved into something. It's actually evolved, but I feel like it holds into its roots of actual pop punk rock, if that makes any sense. Based on some of the lyrics, and so based on more of the the darker material and things like that. It's not just heartbreak and bubblegums,
Yeah. And I think that's definitely like when Blink-182 was, right? And Blink-182 is the first time I remember like cute girls liking bands that liking a band that I like. Like I like Blink-182 a lot, like in like the early 90s. It was like I consider them like the punk rock kind of starter kit. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of go one or two ways, right? So
I think everybody had a Blink-182 time in their lives.
And and I think they were just such a popular band in the late 90s that it was hard to kind of escape them. But definitely, and then I think all of that has its roots in punk rock. It's just the way you go about it. For sure. It was a really recognizable riff and just a huge song.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? Let's jump into our next song. Let's jump into one of yours.
Okay, so the first one I'm going to talk about is Enter Sandman by Metallica. It's the first song I ever played with another person. My buddy Steve, I remember Metallica was the reason I think me and him became friends because he had a Metallica patch on the back of his backpack. And I'm like, dude, I like Metallica, but I realized that up until then, I was a freshman in high school, I had only heard Load and Reload, but I liked them. And then I remember when when we started hanging out, he let me borrow Ride the Lightning. And I'm like, I knew Enter Sandman just because it's like that was one of their more popular songs. It was all over the radio for a while. But he introduced me to like proper Metallica. And I think when you're learning to play an instrument and for the drums, Lars Ulrich, if you're into metal, Lars Ulrich from Metallica is kind of your hero when you're first starting out drums because his stuff is not super complicated and it is not super hard, but it's still pretty, like it still rocks, it's still metal. And this song especially kind of has all those, kind of checks all those boxes. It's got a big tom fill, it's got a couple breakdowns, but there's never anything that's so hard that when you're first starting out, you're not going to be able to do it. And I think the riff is kind of the same way. The main riff, I think, is not that hard to play, even though I don't think I've ever learned it.
Sorry, I was looking up one of the songs from Ride the Lightning. Ride the Lightning is actually the first album I was introduced to by Metallica. One of my closest friends to this day, he had back in the day when we used to have CDs, he had this booklet, this huge booklet of CDs, and right at the top was all of these Metallica records. And this was I was probably a 7th or 8th grader, and I remember he did me a favor and he made the original Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning and Justice for All and Master Puppets. He burned those CDs for me, and the first one I put into my computer, it was just kind of whatever I picked up first, and that was Ride the Lightning. I remember when I heard Ride the Lightning, I said, holy crap, this is, because that was never something that I was into, you know what I mean? Like I was never into metal as a kid. And when I started as a teenager, you get into punk rock and you get into metal and whatever that is, and then you kind of just evolve into what you want to listen to. But I mean, up until then, I was more into, like you've said, I was a pop oriented person for a long time, and then I got introduced to, after metal, got introduced to new metal, and that was Korn and Limp Bizkit and all that stuff. That was the height of their fame right there. So that's what I was introduced to.
Yeah.
But I could understand. I mean, I could understand why Metallica would be one of the, especially one would be one of the first songs that you would learn on the drums. Yeah.
Wait, let's Enter Sandman. We'll get to one.
Sorry,
we'll get to one in a second.
Enter Sandman. Sorry, I got all discombobulated. Yeah, Enter Sandman.
And they're one of those bands that you can become like easily obsessed with, right? They were just larger than life for the longest time.
Yeah,
I remember me and Steve were obsessed with the behind the music from Metallica. We'd watch it over and over again. And they had this documentary called A Year and a Half in the life of Metallica. It was 2 cassettes. I think we only had the second one. And then eventually I ended up seeing the first one, which is actually really interesting because it was them in the studio. And they were just pissed at each other recording the Black Album. I think
interesting.
I think it was 8 months of recording time. I think they remixed the album like 3 or 4 times. It cost them $1 million. And I remember there's like points in the documentary where like Lars wants like James to sing something again, but James's voice hurts, and fucking James is just like, I wouldn't ask you to play drum solo if your arm fell off. Like just shit like that. And then one really interesting thing that I think I had mentioned to you the last time we talked, but they even started getting pissed off at the cameraman because they're like, look, I'm playing this song for the first time, like I'm riffing it for the first time. I might never get a take as good as this again. If you step on a fucking cable and ruin a take, like it like I might not ever be able to capture that again. And I never understood that until now. Like you're right. Like the first time you nail something, it might not be the same. Because there's a great little section, you can find it on YouTube, of Bob Rock. Like it's I think it's the solo to Unforgiven. And like Kirk Hammett plays some solo and Bob Rock's like, no man, that's not good enough for the song. Like do it again. And him just kind of getting like upset until he finally like nails the solo that's finally on there.
Interesting. Yeah, there's many times where I've done first takes on a lot of songs that I've recorded or, things that we're doing. And I always feel that the first one is not up to par. And then you do it. I remember when I did a demo of a handful of songs that I was trying to do for an EP when I was in my early 20s. It took me forever because I did all the instruments myself for one song, and it took me about 2.5 hours to do the drum track. And then when I finally got to the guitar, I did it once, and that was it. And then the guy's like, "Do you want to run it again?" I go, "No, we're good. We're good because I know for a fact that this is going to be good. And you're never going to get it any better than this." And there was other times where another song that I did when we had the band together, I had done a guitar track, the rhythm for like for the rough cut, so that way the drummer can follow along. And I think we ended up keeping that one. So I totally understand. It's you definitely want to, if you can capture the magic in one take, why not? But but there's also perfectionists. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not short of perfection, but when it comes to music, I always hear something in my head, and then when I finally get it, I need to do it over and over and over again until I get it correctly. So
You are very exacting as a person, especially when it comes to your music.
Yeah, that's true. I am. Yeah, that's something that I've tried to work on. I feel like it can be a little overbearing sometimes. I have a funny story about that. When I moved back here in my early 20s, I had moved out of the state for a while. When I came back, I started the band that I was in for a few years, and I remember we were grinding, like practicing 3 times a week for like 6 weeks, just grinding it, right? And I remember there was 5 members in the band, and 3 of them that were new to the band had said, "Hey, like, we're not having fun. Like, this isn't fun. Like, all you're doing is telling us to do this and do that. Like, we need to get this tighter. We need to get this tighter. Like, it's not fun at all." And my buddy Marcus, who is essentially like my yin to my yang when it comes to music, you know, like he had they hadn't told me, they had told him. And Marcus says, "Dude," he goes, "Guys, honestly, like, just wait. Give it a few more weeks. Once the initial startup is gone, Renee's going to be a lot calmer." And I felt so bad because he told me that after, and then they all told me that about 2-3 months in. It's like, dude, we were ready to leave just because you were so anxious about just getting it tighter and tighter. And then eventually it was just, you know, you'd ring the first note for band practice and you'd go over your set 3-4 times in a row without a hitch. You know what I mean? But yeah, I definitely, I can definitely, well, when I was younger, I was definitely a lot worse.
Yeah, you were pretty bad, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I was pretty sorry about that, guys.
I'm all right. No, yeah, but yeah, that's one of the things especially when you're first starting out, the idea of recording is such a kind of foreign concept. Beyond just takes, but it's like then all the shit that has to, like, I can understand remixing an album 3 times or whatever, right? Like, you can do so much shit, especially now.
Yep.
You got to remember, like, that was, what was it, Black Album? It was 91. Excuse me. With 91, man, like, if you wanted to remix shit, it was a fucking process. And now, oh man, you can do all that shit, like,
you can do it remotely.
You can do it remotely. You can do it. You can do it all, like, in one program. You don't have to have all this expensive ass equipment.
Yeah. One of my buddies showed me a post of a band who had promoted a new single that they're releasing, and they said that they sent it over to the other side of the country to get a certain producer and do it all remotely. So they send it there and then they bring it back. Like, it's crazy, man. Like, I remember one of our former episodes when we talked about the postal service. I mean, they had to mail things to each other, right? And now it's not like that. Now it's just like, hey, here's an email, here's a Dropbox, just, you know, listen to this and fix it for us or whatever it is, right? It's so crazy. It's so crazy, the technology, but how much better technology is getting to. Well, it's all like for listening experience.
Yeah, no, for sure. But like, and I just remember reading this, but I'm like looking it up really quick. So, what's her name? Billie Eilish, the producer, just did it in his bedroom.
Wow.
Like, it's all like, in so much of this stuff. Like, what was that song? Old Town Road. You remember that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Like, that was blowing up, but that was just dudes on a computer and in a bedroom. Like that. You don't even need all that expensive gear anymore.
Yeah. I agree. Let's hop over to the next song.
See, the next one.
I think it's one of mine, right?
Yeah. Next one is "Sugar" by System of a Down, man.
You have to say it the right way.
Oh, sugar. I've played this song more times than I care to admit.
This song was an introduction to metal for me. Would you consider this metal?
This was the beginning of the kind of hype wave of new metal that was coming out. I know, like, bands like Korn had been around since like the mid 90s, but when System of a Down came about, especially if you lived in LA, it was kind of like the rising wave of new metal that would eventually take over everything. Yeah.
So this band, I listened to the self-titled and Toxicity, like my 7th and 8th grade year. It was just Toxicity and the self-titled for days and days. I made mixtapes so I can put them in the tape the tape deck in my mom's car and my dad's car. Like any car I had a mixtape of these two records. This thing was like took over my life. At the time, I was maybe a 7th grader. We were trying to start a band in 7th grade. And I remember this is when I was still learning how to play guitar. So we were playing, they played drop C, right? And so I was playing in standard tuning, not even drop D. And it just was not sounding correctly, but we thought it was like the greatest thing ever. Like we didn't have an ear yet, right? You were learning how to play. You didn't have an ear yet. And there's a video somewhere of me out there that with me and my buddy Manny, him playing the drums. And it was probably the worst video because after we thought we were so kick-ass, we rewinded and watched it ourselves. And we're like, what are we thinking? And that actually was the moment when I said, I need to get good at this instrument. Like I need to learn how to play this the right way. And then that's when I kind of took it a little more seriously and then just did what I had to do to get better. But this is a song that I didn't learn how to play correctly, but definitely a song that I knew what to do with it. And then eventually I learned how to play it the right way.
Yeah, I mean, it was at least the bands I was in when I first started as a freshman, like playing in different bands. This Sweet Pea, I think we learned like the first 3 or 4 songs off that album, and we were just playing back to back to back, and then like a bunch of Smashing Pumpkins and stuff. Which at the time, like it was like a good learning experience because it was learning different stuff, and I was always pissed because we never wanted to play any of the punk bands I liked. They were strictly new metal and alternative, like that's what they liked. Yeah. Which eventually, like, I left the band and started doing other stuff. But like I remember, yeah, man, that self-titled, I had that on a tape somewhere, and it was just everywhere for years. We were just listening to that. And when Toxicity came out, I remember that being huge and that really taking System to that next
blew
level.
Up like crazy. I'll never forget how big that record got. And it's so interesting because I think that album, in my opinion, is so well done. And I feel that record has every song on that record I would think could be a single. And I feel like most of those songs were singles, right?
Off Toxicity? There was a lot.
Right?
I remember
a lot of singles, yeah.
I remember the self-titled, I think a couple of those songs made it on the radio, but I remember, especially in LA, because they were a local band, I think they're out of Glendale. That really set the base for them. Like they had like a huge following, and then when Toxicity came out, I feel like they just exploded. And it was like crazy. Absolutely. When did that come out? Yeah. It was out in 2002.
2002.
2002 is when they came out, and I remember, because I just graduated, and it was just all over the place. And I remember I saw System of a Down at the Best Buy parking lot for a K-Rock calendar signing. That was like the first time, I think it was one of the first times I saw them was in the parking lot of a Best Buy, and I got Adam Carolla's signature on my K-Rock calendar.
Do you remember when K-Rock had merchandise and the Kevin and Bean Christmas records and the calendars and the sticker? The sticker was such a big deal here in Southern California. Do you remember that? Every year when we got the new sticker was a big deal.
K-Rock was a big deal for a long, long time. And I think we could do a whole episode on just the importance of K-Rock.
Yeah.
Just in general. But I know they were on the cutting edge of just like rock music and new wave, and like I think even like some of the punk bands, I think a lot of that was like Rodney Bingenheimer, who was famously on K-Rock for years, but he was one of the first ones to play a lot of bands. Have you ever seen the documentary Mayor of the Sunset Strip about Rodney Bingenheimer?
No, I have not.
A small tangent here, but I highly recommend you go see that documentary. Because for those of you who are not familiar with Rodney Bingenheimer, he is a radio DJ that was on K-Rock from the beginning of that station, like in the late 70s, early 80s. He was the one that picked up David Bowie from the airport the first time he came to America. And there's a scene in this documentary, because he's basically like a legend, but no one really knows who he is. A lot of like what would become popular alternative, punk rock, all that, he played on his late night radio show first. But to perfectly encapsulate him as a person and what he was all about. There's a scene in the documentary where the cameraman is in his living room. He lives in some small house like in Hollywood. And if you're ever in Hollywood and you go to Cantor's, he's usually there. I've actually seen him at Cantor's. But he's like looking for something in like a pile somewhere. And the cameraman pans to this small framed, like, it almost looks like a small piece of paper. And he's reading it and he goes, "Hey, Rodney, what's this?" And he goes, "Oh, that's Elvis's driver's license." And then the cameraman goes, "Like his actual driver's license?" And then Rodney, like, not even missing, he's still just looking for some other random thing. He goes, "Yeah." And then you hear the cameraman, he's like not on mic, but you hear him like in the back, and goes, "How did you get it?" And then Rodney just like doesn't even look at him. He goes, "Oh, he gave it to me," and then like walked out of the room.
Wow, that's
like,
awesome. I have to take a look at that documentary.
Yeah, and he's just this weird old man. Like God bless him, but I remember Kevin and Bean used to make fun of him every day because some of his radio show was so slow, and it was just he's getting up there in age, so it's hilarious. But yeah, man, a legend in his own right.
And even the Kevin and Bean show too, man. I mean, K-Rock. Yeah, you're right. K-Rock just in general is just a legendary radio station. I feel like it's definitely gone down with digital music and all that stuff. But I don't think people listen to the radio anymore, do they?
I think a lot of them do, but I don't think they listen. I think it comes down to I listen to K-Rock. I listen to Kevin and Bean all the time. Like they were my radio show for a long time.
Yeah, mine too. For a really long time.
Like I used to listen to the podcast, and they explain a lot about like what's actually happening to radio. And the short answer is, radio is still super popular, but not with the type of music that you and I are talking about.
Yeah,
that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's all alternative now, huh? Yeah, that's true. It's all different.
Now, I mean, the radio is it's like country music. It's like,
oh really?
Because if you're listening to alternative or hip hop or any kind of more modern music, you tend to be younger. You're listening to it on Spotify, Apple Music, whatever. But if you're like an older person and you listen to country music, or if you're Spanish speaking, like you might not be as inclined to do this. So that's what's ruling LA radio.
Interesting.
It's crazy.
I'm gonna have to do a deep dive on that. Yeah, that's interesting. Let's hop over to one of your songs.
Right, my next one. Well, let's get all the Metallica songs out of the way. Let's go to one. Okay. So, one is if you're a drummer and you play metal, one is very important because it is probably the first double kick lick you'll ever learn. It is both deceptively complicated and really easy at the same time. Because once you kind of get that cadence down and you learn how to start and stop that, I think it's only like 6 notes. And you can do it in time. You've kind of opened your world to the world of double bass. It's even got a couple gallops in there later on, but it's like a rite of passage for a drummer that if you're gonna get double bass, you got to learn how to play one, and then you just move on.
That's the best way to go.
Yeah. Next from that is something that's just straight double bass, because this is something that's about the double kick that I think people don't understand. Once you kind of get going, you can maintain that for a while. Like once you get that momentum of like that's a thing you can learn on your own. The hard part sometimes is starting and stopping. So like you can do a crazy double bass fill, but if when you get to the end, you don't stop clean, it just doesn't sound good. So one is one of those cool things because it's only 6 notes, so you got to be real clean on those hits and then stop. And if you got a guitar player and you guys lock in the way Lars and James do, it just sounds cool. Like the first time you play it with someone, you're like, oh man, like we finally got it. And obviously, like, Lars is it's very, Metallica themselves, it's very apparent that, like, normally the drummer and the bass player lock in, but Metallica doesn't do that. Like, the drummer and James, like, it's Lars and James. They're the ones that lock in. Metallica famously have almost been bass averse.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about that before, right?
Mhm.
Where I think the first couple albums they started to drown. They lowered the bass a little bit from some of their records, and I think it was an Injustice for All
Well,
was the one
actually,
where it was most notably.
the first three albums, the ones with Cliff Burton on them, the bass is mixed fine because Cliff Burton, that's one of the all-time like parallel universe things that I'd always wanted to see is what would Metallica be like today if Cliff Burton was still alive? Because so much of early Metallica like is Cliff. I mean, like you like Anesthesia, that pulling teeth, that crazy bass solo. Um, he really introduced like the band to stuff like the Misfits and stuff. Like he was a big part of that band. And the album you're talking about where the bass is mixed super low is Injustice for All, and that's the first album they recorded after he died. Because
Okay.
he famously died in a tour bus accident. But it's kind of like, what would that band be like today if Cliff Burton was still here? And you hear like a lot of metal bass players talk about how he was basically the man. Like he was one of the best bass players for metal that ever lived. So that's one of the great things. Like I wonder what that band would be like with him. And there's
Yeah, a
there's
lot
like
of what ifs, huh?
yeah, there's a meme that it should have been Lars that died. That's like a fucked up thing to say, but it's kind of like, what would
Yeah.
that band be like if Cliff Burton was still alive and they got a new drummer who, so another thing I should mention, it is kind of universally accepted by all drummers to kind of shit on Lars Ulrich, for a couple reasons. There's a lot of live footage of him not really necessarily being in time. Sometimes he doesn't play as clean. You don't notice it when you're at a Metallica show, but if you listen to like a live recording, sometimes it's not as clean. It's not like is in time. But it's also kind of the fact that he's kind of a douche sometimes. The whole Napster thing where he was just a dick. But it's kind of universally accepted. But again, I think he plays an important role in any metal kid, punk kid. The first time you start kind of learning songs, you're probably going to learn him. You're going to learn one before you learn Rain and Blood, for sure.
Yeah. He's the Ringo Starr of Metallica, of metal.
Yes, that is true. I've seen that meme.
Yeah.
He is the Ringo
Yeah.
Starr of metal.
The Ringo Starr of metal. I think it was you that there was an interview with the Beatles where they had asked the Beatles if Ringo Starr was the best drummer of all time, and I think John Lennon said Ringo Starr's not even the best drummer in the Beatles.
Yeah, it's like one of the famous
Yeah.
quotes.
Yeah.
But you know what? Here's the thing. Like I've seen so many people talk about like, oh, Ringo wasn't all that good. But the thing is, the best way I've heard Ringo described is Ringo wrote riffs on drums.
Yeah. But you know what? That was common in the 60s. You know what I mean? Like if you go back and listen to a lot of 60s rock and roll, like there's not much to it. It was definitely more of a background than anything else. Where now I feel like drums have definitely taken center stage, and there's a lot more drummers that sound busy, things like that. I if you go back and listen to a lot of that older rock and roll, you'll definitely realize I've noticed that it's very one dimensional at times. And then as they get older, right, as they get into more like psychedelic Beatles, he definitely has a different approach to it. But I don't think the Beatles would be the Beatles without Ringo. I think Ringo definitely brought something to them too. Even though they say he wasn't that good, I still think he had to have something to have the whole band there.
Well, that's what I mean. I think like any other drummer would have done. You take something like Come Together, right?
Mm-hmm.
That song, the recognizable piece to that is the drum.
Yeah.
Right? That's the thing. It's the hi-hat, the two tom things, and then when it gets to the actual like lyrics and the like verse, it's just a 4 on the floor like kick drum and like tom.
Yeah.
And it's like some other asshole would have played a dumb fill or put a normal beat, like hit a snare in there. But no, the song is perfect the way it is because he's like, look, I'm going to come up with this cool, for lack of better words, melody on the drums. And then we're just going to go from there. And like, yeah, normally the drums, you think of it's the rhythm section, right? It's the heart of it's kind of like the heart of the band. But because the Beatles, it's like, they were four like superheroes, right? Like they each had their own little like cult following.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of like got brought into like kind of the center stage a little bit, and he wrote riffs on drums.
Yeah. I mean, he wrote Yellow Submarine, man.
For God's sake.
There's a performance. I don't know for what it was. It was some sort of celebration, and I think it was like a celebration of the Beatles, I think. And then they had Paul McCartney. It was the first time that Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr were together to perform. And they had this big ordeal, right? First it was Ringo, and then it was Paul, and then they got them together. And then, they showcased Ringo on the drums. And I had looked at it, and I was like watching it. It had to have been years ago. And I thought to myself, he's not playing what I'm hearing.
Yep.
And then they like zoom out, and it's some other drummer in the background, like just, doing the rest of the fills that he can't do anymore because he's older now, right? But it's just, he's just, dude, the way I see it, there's four people in the Beatles, and those are the most important people, some of the most important musicians of all time, and one of them's Ringo Starr. Like, he doesn't need to do it. He just goes out there and sings Yellow Submarine, and you're good. People are going to go ape for it.
I've said this for years. The reason Ringo is my favorite Beatle is because now it's only Paul and Ringo out there, right? But Paul is out there. I love it. Paul is out there writing new songs, trying his goddamnedest to stay relevant in a world where he's becoming increasingly less relevant, right? Just happens, right? The Beatles will always be relevant. But I don't know if Paul McCartney's latest album, which is, of course, Renee, you could tell me.
I don't know Paul McCartney's
right? But he's always trying to, like, write new songs and do all this shit. And Ringo just is like, hey, all right, who wants to hear Yellow Submarine? Because I'm going to play it.
Guys, anyone?
You know what I mean? I'm going to do Octopus Garden. I'm going to do, don't worry about it. Like, I know the score.
We are good, dude. We're good.
I think honestly, Homeboy's like, look, dude, I am lucky as shit that I was in that band. Like,
it's oh god, it's gonna be a sad day, man. Because I mean, they're up there in age. It's gonna be a sad. Yeah, it's gonna be it's one of those. I remember when George Harrison passed away. I think I was 12 years old, 13 years old, somewhere around there. It was. I remember, man, that hit hard when I found, when he had the heart attack. And I was like, oh my gosh, oh man, that's crazy. Because even at that point I was already a Beatles fan. And it's kind of like the Simpsons and the Beatles to me are synonymous in when they're gone, it's gonna hurt.
It's gonna hurt.
It's gonna hurt.
It's gonna hurt.
Yeah, it's gonna hurt. Yeah. So how about on to the next song? Let's go to the next one.
Since we're on a Beatles kick, why don't we talk about Eleanor Rigby?
Sure. So Eleanor Rigby is one of mine. I stopped going to music school when I was, I think, 12, 13. All of this happened in this time. And my cousin Romeo, who hopefully will be having on the show soon, he gave me this book. It was the Beatles. It was an easy chord Beatles guitar book. And he was the person that taught me how to play on time. One time I was at his house, and I remember one of the first things I ever learned was the Super Mario theme song. And I remember playing it, and he goes, dude, you're playing too fast. Now you're playing too slow. Now you're playing too fast. I go, what are you talking about? And he goes, you have to learn how to stay on rhythm. You have to stay on beat. And he's the one that taught me to do that. Eleanor Rigby was the first song that I learned on rhythm. And he wrote it the whole way through. And if it wasn't for him, I don't know, because you don't learn that. You don't learn that. Sometimes I feel like that's one of the last things that you learn. And ever since then, if there's one thing I pride myself in my musicianship, it's the fact that I can keep time very, very well. Like, very, very well. Like, sometimes there was times in the band where I felt like I was the one keeping time. Like, I had to get everybody back on time, you know what I mean? And things like that. So I always feel, you give me a metronome, bro, and I'm on it. Like, you don't need any other takes.
Well, I remember, and I think timing is it's massively underappreciated for every other instrument except for the drums. I know when I first wanted to play the drums, I think I don't think I've ever said this story on the podcast. Maybe I have, but I remember I actually started off playing the violin. I know you started off playing the accordion.
I did. Yeah, I'm 5 years old.
Yeah, which God, I wish you still played that.
Oh, dude, me too. I still have it. I don't remember how to play it.
And I'm gonna tell a little story later about the kids when I used to teach in South Central. But in South Central, like there were a bunch of these kids who were into like norteños and stuff, and they would talk about accordions the way you and I talk about guitars and drums.
Yeah,
they'd be like,
awesome.
"Oh man, that's a Panther. That's a nice one." Like the way I would look at like a Les Paul or something. And they were, I'm like, dude, that's rad, dude. They would have like accordion apps on their iPads, and they would just like rip on them. It was crazy.
That's awesome.
But anyway,
I just want to reference. I was in the advanced class at 7 years old.
There you go.
And then I think I stopped at 9, and it just went over my head. I don't remember any of it. But then again, I should try to pick it up. Maybe I'm sure it'll come back to me, right?
You know what? And that's the thing. Like once you kind of learn an instrument and you just kind of know where the notes are, you kind of go from there.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No. But God, what was I talking about? We were talking about
keeping time.
Keeping time. Oh, so I remember when I first started playing drums, and I remember telling my mom I don't want to play the violin anymore. I want to play the drums, and just the look on her face, like, oh God, because I was already going to lessons and doing all that stuff. She found a local. A person that was more local in San Gabriel Valley. And before he would take me, he had me come in like to meet him. He was a super old dude who played like jazz style, like traditional grip and everything. But before he would give me lessons, he made me come in. He would put on records and he would say, okay, clap along to this. And he would just play some random thing and I would have to like, and he made me do it for like 3 or 4 songs. And then he looked at my mom and said, yeah, he can get it. And then she's like, what was that? He goes, I don't take students unless they know how to do that. So if they cannot intrinsically feel where the beat is, I won't try to teach them because they're just not going to get it. And I was like, oh, interesting. And I think I take a different approach because I try to teach everyone. I tell people, if you can count to 4, you can play the drums. If Meg White can be a famous drummer and be right for that drum, for that thing, you can do it. But he was just
song?
But he was just old school about it. He's like, no, if I can't feel he can keep time, I'm not gonna try to teach him an instrument.
That would actually be an interesting experiment to show somebody the drums. But the first thing they need to do is just listen to Meg White play the drums.
There you go.
I think that would be a great way to introduce new musicians. Say, hey, I want to learn how to play the drums. Listen to Seven Nation Army by White Stripes, and then follow that beat. And as long as you can do that, you'll be able to get on the drums.
And that's that's like another drummer that I think she's kind of like a secret weapon. Like everyone kind of makes fun of her fills, but like, could you imagine another drummer in that band?
It would not work.
It wouldn't work. Like it's crazy.
It wouldn't work. Yeah, that's all Jack White.
Yeah, man.
Last time I saw Jack White and Meg White were, I remember this was right before Seven Nation Army. They were on I don't know if you remember the movie Coffee and Cigarettes.
Oh, I remember it.
Yeah, they were in there too. I think they had made like a time machine or something like that in their scene. I think it was.
He was creating a Tesla coil.
Yeah,
I remember that because I watched that. That Bill Murray scene is legendary.
I love that Bill Murray scene.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, let's. Should we go on to the next one?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so the next one is off mine, and it's "Superficial Love" by TSOL. Old school OC punk rock band. It's the first song I ever played in a full band. I'm talking bass, guitar, singer, like the whole thing. It's also the first song I learned how to play on guitar, and the first song where I provided some vocals, just in the background screaming. But really, like TSOL is one of those bands that really influenced a lot of bands coming out of like the Southern California scene, and then even like some of the more hardcore bands like Slayer does a cover of Superficial Love. But I remember these guys were hugely influential for me, and part of the reason that I did not gravitate towards the pop punk scene was seeing these guys live. Because at the time, like some of the first bands I saw live were like Homegrown, and bands like that. Those are like pop punk bands. Would you consider those pop punk bands? Like
Yeah,
Homegrown?
absolutely. Yeah.
But I remember the first time I saw TSOL, I think it was at the Glass House in Pomona. There was no security. You could just get on stage. And they just did not care. Like, they did not care. Like, people would get on stage. They would sing songs with them. I actually got to sing Code Blue with TSOL one time. Because I remember reading interviews with Gentleman Jack, the singer, and being like, I remember the scene in the 80s where like we would just DIY it, and I want to recapture that for now. And he would straight up call it, he goes, I see bands like Blink-182 who are these big, polished, produced. He would say, like, I feel like they're bands that are just trying to get laid, and they wanted to sing about anarchy. So it's like, I want to do that now. And it was such a mind-blowing thing for me as a kid that I was like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to listen to bands that don't exist anymore. Which kind of sucked, because it's like it was hard to get, you know, chicks to be into like Black Flag at the time. There were not a lot of punk rock chicks at our school, but now there are, but I'm happily married.
Yeah. You know, Superficial Love that song reminds me of The Adventures of Pete and Pete.
Why is that?
I hear that song and I think to myself that Superficial Love would be a song that would be on The Adventures of Pete and Pete. I don't know if you're familiar with the band Polaris, but Polaris did the theme song to The Adventures of Pete and Pete. And there was an episode of Pete and Pete where Little Pete was heard. He like, you know, walked by this garage and they were playing some song and he was trying to capture it. And for some reason, that show for me, I would think that song just would fit into that show for some reason.
Yeah, I
mean, I thought when I heard it. When I heard it, I was like, this song sounds like a song that would be on The Adventures of Pete and Pete. That was the first thing that popped into my head when I heard it.
I mean, I guess a song about not wanting to be drafted into.
No, I'm not talking about the lyrics though. Just no. Like if you step away from what they're singing about, the song itself, like the song itself without the lyrics, just would sound like a song that would be on The Adventures of Pete and Pete. Aside from the lyrics,
I think I understand what you're saying. But if The Adventures of Pete and Pete were, I mean, 90s Nickelodeon was a magical thing, and that show was ridiculous. The fact that it was made, the fact that it handled some of the things that it did. Yeah, man, I see where you're going with that. I see at first I didn't really know, but now I see. And yeah. This is like there was a lot of OC bands that came out of that scene in the late, like in the 80s. You got the Vandals, DI, like just these hardcore bands that came out of there. And I feel like a lot of them would probably fit on The Adventures of Pete and Pete.
Yeah. If you take away the subject matter of the song,
yeah,
they would just fit. Like Hey Sandy does not fit into the themes. The lyrics of Hey Sandy do not go with the song, with like the intro of, you know, with the theme song for The Adventures of Pete and Pete. But if you step away from that, the song just, you know, the overall song itself just makes sense for it to be the theme song. You know what I mean? So that's why I think Superficial Love, you know, when I first heard it, like I said, aside from the subject matter, I was like, oh, this song sounds like it should be on the Adventures of Pete and Pete. Yeah,
I can get with it.
Yeah. I have to watch that now. I haven't seen that show in so long. I have the 3 seasons on DVD somewhere.
Nice.
I have in a box with all my other DVDs that I'm sure have been warped by now because they're probably in the garage.
Yeah.
Do you even have your DVDs?
I have a select few. I want to actually get rid of all my boxes for the DVDs and just buy like a CD binder. Because eventually, I don't know. It has to do with like redecorating the living room and getting rid of furniture and putting new stuff in. But eventually I'll do that.
When was the last time you put a DVD in?
It actually happens every couple months for me because I watch The Big Lebowski.
Okay.
Once every couple months I'll put it on just because I need a Lebowski fix, and I have that on Blu-ray.
That's what I do with Blood In Blood Out.
Yeah. And of course that one.
I don't. That's the only DVD. Everything else I have on my shelf are Blu-rays.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know, man. I'm a fan of Blu-rays, dude. Like, I
So-
like the special. I love all of that stuff.
So
I think
when you
people
said
forget about
DVD,
all
I
that.
thought you were like referring just in terms of general, like, I don't know if I have a lot of my old DVDs because I did end up rebuying them on Blu-ray.
Mm.
But I don't know if the Adventures of Pete and Pete are ever going to get the Blu-ray treatment.
No, I don't. I don't think so. Like Ren and Stimpy. I'm sure is not going to get the.
Yeah.
I still have those actually too. Those
And,
are.
you know, there are some things that actually you only have, like the version that is like the desirable one is only on DVD, I think.
Yeah, you know, it's funny you mentioned that because there's an episode on of Seinfeld on Hulu where they have like rerun versions of certain episodes, like Wayne Knight when before they casted him as Newman, there was an episode of them where you hear Larry David's voice, and they do a rerun episode of him of Wayne Knight doing the voice of Newman for that. And then there's an episode where they introduced George Costanza's dad for the first time, and it wasn't Jerry Stiller, it was somebody else. Like little things like that, you know, those are things that you can't find. You know, those are just things that they pull out from whatever the originals are. So that's what I enjoy about DVDs. Like I still have my Seinfeld ones. I don't really use them because.
And I think you were talking. I interpret it as like physical media.
Yeah. Well, yeah, physical media. Yeah, absolutely.
But you're right. Like the thing about like streaming is there's all those extras, the like audio tracks, the commentary tracks. That's not on streaming anywhere.
Yeah.
So if you're like a super nerd like me and you watch the extras, you kind of want the thing.
Yeah, the bonus features.
Yeah.
Do you remember when it was like when Lord of the Rings came out, when they did the extended version, it was like a 4 DVD. It was one movie, like when Fellowship came out, it was 4 DVDs and 3 of them were just bonus features.
I believe it. I still kind of want to own the extended versions of the Lord of the Rings, man. I don't think I've ever watched the extended ones. But I've heard
I have the first one. Yeah.
I got to get them. This next one.
Yeah. Let's go to the next one.
All right, man. Your next one, the early November Decoration on Spotify, it calls it the rock version. Is there a non-rock version?
Yeah, there is a non-rock version. So this quick story, this song came off of a record that was released in 2006. It was called The Mother, the Mechanic, and the Path. It is a triple CD. It is a triple album. It comes with your basic rock record, like the next rock album, like the next would have been their sophomore record because they came out with their first one, and then this was supposed to be record number 2, but it turned out to be 2, 3, and 4. Record number the second one, The Mother, is a softer side of them, more acoustic. You hear some country and there's some blues riffs and stuff like that. And then the third one is a story. It's a story told through music. So there's tracks of somebody speaking about something going on within the story, and then they follow, and then there's songs that go along with it. And so there's a version of Decoration on the third one, the Path album, that is like an acoustic, softer, different version. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. If you ever, you don't have to listen to those first 2, but it'd be kind of interesting for you to listen to the third one. It's just you just start from the beginning to the end. It's just a story. I'd actually like to get your take on that. That'd be kind of interesting. Some homework for you, Jose.
Oh, God damn it! Yeah, all right, I'll do it.
It'd be the Path, the third record.
Honestly though, so this one, that riff is catchy as fuck, man. That is a very catchy riff.
Yes, yeah. So I picked this song. This is one of the first songs that I learned how to play lead for.
Aha.
Yes, I was.
I don't know why I made that one.
Yeah. And then I think the worst part is that I followed you. Though.
Yes.
Yeah. It's getting close to Halloween, everybody. That's why we're doing it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, from when we're recording this, it's closer to Halloween.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed we do is it's like this isn't coming out for a couple weeks. It's like, yeah, man, Game 3 of the World Series. It's like,
yeah, I didn't think about that. You're right. Yeah,
it happens.
Well, we need to be a little more incognito about when we record these things.
We're going for what's called evergreen content.
Cool. So I picked this song.
Little peek behind the curtain for y'all.
He's breaking the fourth wall.
Breaking the fourth wall.
Hi, Mom. So we are. What the hell was I saying, dude? You threw me off.
Decoration. You learned this because you learned lead.
This is the first song I ever learned on lead. This is I used to put a lot of rhythm, but this is the very first song that I wanted to learn lead for, and I did. and the rest is history. And now I'm a lead guitarist now, more
like
than a rhythm. Well, actually, I started with rhythm, and then I went into lead, and I played lead for a long time. And then when we started the Norm and I went back into rhythm, and then I've kind of stayed there. But obviously, I do my little riffs and stuff. I like to think I make some cute riffs, but I never know where to put them in. But like what songs to put them in. But that's basically the whole story for Decoration.
I like it. Next one off of mine is Everlong by the Foo Fighters. This one was big for me because it was that endurance, being able to play that like two hands on the hi-hat. My old drum teacher, my first drum teacher, the jazz guy, used to call it the disco beat, when you would basically do like the 1E and a 2E and on the hi-hat. But I just remember having the endurance to get through this and the coordination to have both hands on the hi-hat and still play the kick drum pattern and be able to come down to the snare. It was just like a big deal when I was finally able to nail it. And I think like the Foo Fighters are one of those bands that I'm really glad are around, because I don't think there are very many big straight up rock bands anymore. And the fact that Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters and a handful of other bands still do it.
Are you a Foo Fighters fan? I would have never thought that you were a Foo Fighters fan.
You know what? I am. I'm not going to say I'm like their biggest fan, but I know the color and the shape, that album that this is off of. Yeah. It was one of the first records I ever bought. Because I remember liking the song on the radio. And it would like Dave Grohl, later on I would find out, is basically into all the same stuff that I like. Mm-hmm. Even though the Foo Fighters are considered a more how would you say it, like mainstream rock band.
I was gonna say like generic rock band, but there's no other band that sounds like them. So yeah, just they're like a big time rock band.
They're
right?
Big time, like the kind of stuff that I didn't really like growing up. Yeah, and once I get into punk rock, right? But then every time you you read an interview with Dave Grohl, all he does is talk about the fact that like he would. I mean, obviously he was in Nirvana, so that's a big deal in and of itself. So the fact that the Foo Fighters came about and he got to like break out of that shell is a big deal. But I mean, all he ever does is talk about how Motorhead was like the greatest band ever. It was recently Ian Mackay of Fugazi and Minor Threat fame, I think recently released a letter that Dave Grohl wrote him at 14. Like Dave Grohl grew up like in the punk rock scene. Like he knows all these old school bands. He's in the like Descendants documentary. He spoke at Lemmy's funeral from Motorhead. So the guy basically just figured out a way to take all that old school shit that I love and make something new out of it. So yeah, man, I would consider myself a Foo Fighters fan for sure.
Yeah. He and you can't forget that when he was in Queens of the Stone Age.
Oh yeah. That was a big record for me too.
That was a very big record for me. Yeah, that record was probably the reason why I wanted to play drums. Like after, right? Like after, like I mean, you were the reason I wanted to play drums, but then after that, I got over that because I started playing guitar. And then when I heard Queens of the Stone Age when I was in high school, like I wasn't really into Queens of the Stone Age at a younger age, but in high school I was like, man, I really want to try to play drums, because I remember just listening to that. I was like, because I remember listening to Nirvana, and I remember Dave Grohl. I'm not saying he's not a great drummer. I think he's a great drummer, but I feel like in Nevermind or some of the other stuff, I feel like some of the stuff was very kind of like a generic grunge drum, And then when you listen to like Queens of the Stone Age, you think, wow, like this guy does this too. It was just a totally different Dave Grohl, and I think that's kind of what got me to wanting me to play drums after that. So I mean, I dabble, right? I dabble.
It should also be noted that I think you are very grunge averse. You don't really like grunge.
Yeah, not really. No,
because I
do know. Yeah.
Because some of those like early drum beats, like were like really like influential for like other bands coming out, but
sure.
And it's also like you got to remember, like it became generic because Nirvana was kind of the ones that broke open that door.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, like I see what you're saying. But like Dave Grohl, he's another kind of unsung hero of drums because he's an amazing drummer. And you know, a lot of like the stuff he talks about. Like, there's an interview where he talks about he learned to play drums because of Bill Stevenson. It's like listening to Black Flag and Descendants records. And I think he talks about how he stole one of the drum licks for a Queens of the Stone Age song. But I don't remember exactly that story. But beyond that, it's also like Everlong is just one of the great rock songs of all time, in my opinion. It's just a great, well-written song.
I like that song, but I feel like is it My Hero? I feel like My Hero is kind of tops the Everlong for some reason. I think the acoustic version of Everlong is awesome, but I feel like My Hero is just
My Hero. I remember in watching a documentary on the Foo Fighters, they talked about how they did their first album, which I think was self-titled, and then it was like the producer or like a friend was like, I wonder if they have any more songs in them. Like, I wonder if Dave has anything else in him. And the first song he played him was My Hero. And he goes, okay, no, these guys are going to have like a career because he can obviously still write songs. And that obviously that drum intro is great. That's like 4 drummers like layered on top of each other. That's a great intro. Yeah. But yeah, man, like they're great songwriters and
are the Smashing Pumpkins considered grunge? Because Siamese Dream is one of my favorite records, and I love 10 by Pearl Jam. Maybe I'm just not a Nirvana fan. I think that's what it is. You know what? Okay, here's the thing. I'm gonna do a little tangent. Nirvana. I loved Nirvana when I was a freshman in high school, and then after that, it was nonstop Nirvana all over high school for however long I was there.
It should be noted. Go ahead, and then I will.
It was just way too much Nirvana for it. I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I kind of got over that. But I do love 10 and some Smashing Pumpkins. But is Smashing Pumpkins considered grunge?
I think they're considered alternative. But then again, you're talking to the guy that doesn't really. I'm really bad at designating genres for bands. I'm just terrible at it. But I do think I remember them getting thrown around with the alternative label. All over, because the Smashing Pumpkins are one of my favorites. Like that it was the first concert I ever went to was Smashing Pumpkins, and like Siamese Dream is one of my favorite albums. It's one of my favorite. I think it is my favorite sounding album. Like just the production of it, is incredible. But I was gonna say it should be noted that you are the guy. Like if something gets too popular, you do turn your back on. You will turn your back on.
I don't know. Isn't it funny because I love pop punk, but I have a punk rocker mentality?
Yeah, but that's the odd thing. Pop punk has its eccentricities about it. Yeah. There was a great. I was gonna send it to you. There was a great Hard Times article talking about is the dude Machine Gun Kelly associated with pop punk in any way?
Dude, I think now he is.
Because
actually, it's funny you mentioned that because my nephew sent me a video on TikTok, and it was a Machine Gun Kelly song. I was like, I didn't even realize he was doing this anymore. And that's pretty pop punk to me.
The Hard Times article, like the fake article, obviously was like Machine Gun Kelly bucks pop punk trend by dating a girl his own age, which I thought was hilarious. Which I'm not making light. I know, like, there's a lot of shit that happened in some of these pop punk labels. I'm not trying to make light of it, but I thought it was fucking hilarious.
Yeah. Let's jump to the next one.
Okay, so
I need to get a computer chair like you because I'm uncomfortable.
Oh man, yeah, it's a must. But then I'm in this chair for like all day. All right, man. God damn it, we're gonna talk about it. Hit or miss, New Found Glory. Tell me about it.
Dude, I had to pick this song because I know how much you love New Found Glory. New Found Glory is one of those bands, dude, that was just shunned by the punk rock scene. Like, if you were an old school punk rocker, you hated New Found Glory.
Yes, you did.
Like, they shit all over New Found Glory for the longest time. And isn't it funny how New Found Glory has has held a longevity in their career for so long now, like probably hitting 20 years at this point, and they're still going.
Well, yeah, I mean that doesn't mean they're not being shunned by punk rock, like old school punk rock. But no,
true,
here's the thing: like I think any band that can carve out a piece for themselves, I think that's a great thing. And again, I think it came out. New Found Glory, I think they really started hitting the stride. Because was this one of their first albums? This Nothing Gold Can Stay?
This was their first one, yeah.
So that was 99. I looked it up. So they came out as the wave started kind of going down for punk rock in general. Because like 94 is when it really broke big. And then once you got to 99, they had the unfortunate timing of kind of coming in when the punk rock and the pop punk wave started kind of falling down. So the old school punk rockers were just becoming very possessive of their bands, and right at the beginning of the new metal scene, when all that soft pop punk music is just, you got to tune your guitar down, bro, and talk about suicide.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's emo. That's emo music. Pop punk was about heartbreak.
Oh no, I was talking about like new metal and how like would just take talk about killing.
Trying to drop down. Yeah, trying to go drop C. Yeah.
Get your baggy pants out and just kind of riff it.
That's when you play 7-string guitars and 6-string basses.
7-string guitars, man.
Yeah.
Unless you're that dude from
I could go ahead.
Have you seen that dude from Animals as Leaders, Tobias? I forgot his last name. He plays like a crazy 8-string guitar. But does a lot of like crazy tapping techniques and shit.
No, I never seen that. Interesting.
Look up him, and then if you want to feel really shitty about your guitar playing, look up this girl, Yvette Young. She experiments with like crazy tunings, and she plays the guitar like you would play a piano. And it is unbelievable how crazy good she is.
The first time I ever learned about different tunings was when I listened to Dashboard Confessional in high school.
Oh, there it is.
Because he used to play in a key of D sharp. And the 4 strings, so 6 out of the 5 strings were I think they were all tuned to the same. They're all tuned the same. And then the 5th string was, I think it was an F sharp. So it was pretty insane.
But he would tune all the strings to the same note?
So he tuned Screaming Infidelities. You remember the song Screaming Infidelities?
Everybody remembers that. Yeah.
Okay. So Screaming Infidelities, dude, that song, 5 out of the 6 strings were tuned to a D sharp.
Wow. I got to look that up because that's interesting.
And then the fifth from the top string was tuned to an A sharp. I'm sorry, it was a F sharp.
I'm looking this up.
You gotta look that up. Yeah, it was tuned. I think it was an F sharp. I remember. And then like when he did the song "The Best Deceptions," that was always tuned. That was tuned differently too. That's where I learned to tune a half step down. That's where the show comes from. That's the name of the show, Half Step Down. But that's where I learned. That's where all my guitars are tuned to half a step down because it's easier on my voice. And so I can sing better with that. But so that's why I do.
I found this. I'm sorry. Go. I found this this blog post. Like, okay, the hardest part of this song is the tuning. It is an open D flat tuning. Every string is a D flat except for the A string, which is tuned down half a step to an A flat.
Yeah, there it is.
So it's like, okay, interesting. Yeah. This is from 2011. There's a bunch of like little fake emojis, whatever. Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. And I can still play that song. I just don't like to tune my guitar because then the strings will start to, they wear out and then they crack. But going back to New Found Glory, so the reason I chose this song, this is the first song. I know that I talked about how Sugar was one of the first songs that I learned how to play with like my buddy Manny, but it wasn't correct, right? Like the song, it wasn't a correct song, right? Mm-hmm. New Found Glory, this one was the first song that I learned with my buddy Robert I was 15 years old, and this is the first song that I learned with another guitar player. This is the first time I ever learned with another guitar player. Was Hit or Miss by New Found Glory. And I have to retract my last statement. Hit or Miss is actually the first song that I learned how to play lead for. So I'm a liar. Decoration is the second song I learned how to play lead for. Yeah. But that one was a little more complex. So I guess that's probably why I forget about Hit or Miss. But Hit or Miss is the first time I ever learned how to play with another guitar player.
Interesting.
My buddy Robert. Yeah, that was the first time I tried to learn how to sing, and I realized, wow, I'm not a good singer. So I was 15 years old when I learned that song. Yeah, Hit or Miss. That was the first one. Yeah. Are we over to you, or are we on to our honorable mentions now?
We're on to me for the last one, and then we'll get through these last two honorable mentions because we are running long, man. We're at an hour 15.
Oh, geez.
So the last one for me was Punk Guy by NoFX. And the reason I chose this one is because as a punk rock drummer, if you cannot do that skank beat with one foot, you cannot call yourself a proper modern punk rock drummer without getting that down.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Agree.
For those,
I still can't do that. I still can't do that.
So for years I cheated and used the double bass pedal. And there are times when that is appropriate because it actually does sound different when you use the double pedal. It has like a different attack to it. But if you are a punk rock drummer, the proper way to do, and what I mean by skank beat is it is a really high tempo kick, then snare, then two kicks, then snare. Sometimes it'll be double kick snare, double kick snare, double kick snare. But on this record, pretty much every beat for every song is that skank beat. Punkin' Drublic is just double kick snare, double through the whole thing for most of it. And it was just once you learn it and you can start it and stop it, and then you've got it. NoFX
I can only go for like a certain beat per measure, and then eventually I can't get after a certain speed. Like I just can't. I try and I just cannot get there.
One of the hardest parts of this thing is because punk rock, it's also there's a lot of quick little fills. So you'll get that beat, and then you got to throw in some toms, and then come right back to that. And it once you get it, it's important. But once I finally got it, it was like a big deal among my punk rock friends. It's like, we can finally play Punk Guy. And and then of course you've got the great NoFX, a band that's a conundrum to me. They've put on some of the best shows I've ever seen, and they've put on some of the worst shows I've ever seen.
What is the worst show you've ever been to?
The worst show I've ever been to. That's a good question. I don't know. I really don't. I can't think of. I know I've been to some really bad ones, but I can't think of the worst one. What was yours?
I went to go see a band called Los Campesinos, and they're from Europe. They're from England, from London, and I don't know if this was their first show or not, but I remember me and a friend of mine. They had told me, "Hey, I'm gonna go see Los Campesinos." I said, "Sure, let's go. Like, I'm down, right?" I only know maybe one or two songs from this band. And when we went, it was I forgot the name of the venue, but it's in Santa Ana, not the Observatory. It's a different venue, a little smaller venue. And when we went, dude, there was only two people there. Well, two people to see Los Campesinos, and that was me and my friend. And there was maybe 6 or 7 people there to watch this pay-to-play band that opened for Los Campesinos, mind you, all the way from London. And it was a high school band, and they had their high school band teacher play the saxophone for them. Nice. And the only people that were there, I honestly want to remember that was just us two that went to go see this band. And I felt so bad for them. And I remember looking at them, there was like 10 people in this band. And I thought to myself, how are you guys going to eat today, dude? Like, you probably made $4 today. That's so bad. Like, I felt so bad for these guys. And the singer, hopped over this guardrail with there had no reason to be a guardrail in the first place, and he jumped over this guardrail and he runs up to me, he goes, "I'm so wasted right now." And I said, "Oh, cool, dude." And then he walked back over, he jumped over the guardrail again, and I was like, I felt so bad. Like, I just felt it was just an awkward show. I don't know if I can say it was the worst show, but it was probably the saddest show I've ever been to.
Yeah. What's the worst big name show you've ever seen?
The worst big name show.
Like, you actually paid money to see these guys, and you're like,
yeah,
these guys are terrible.
Dude, I don't know. I honestly have no clue. I don't know. How about, do you have one?
I can't. I'm sure there have been times when I've seen a band and I've been like, these guys are bad. I think one time I saw this band Hot Potty open for it had to have been like TSOL or like one of these punk rock bands, and they were almost like booed off stage. But I think it's because they were not playing like punk rock type music, and they were just getting like lambasted.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I honestly, I'm trying to think about. I've been to shows where there's opening bands. I'm like, this is bad. Mm-hmm. Like, these are. Sure. I'm sorry. Like, you're just not good. Yeah. But I don't. Yeah. I don't know. I can honestly.
We got to think about that and talk about it in an episode.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about some. Yeah. Cool. Right, how about I'll start with my honorable mentions. How's that?
Yeah, let's do your two.
Okay, so I have two honorable mentions today, guys, and one of them is Drive by Incubus, and the other one is Above Me by Rufio. Now, the reason they're honorable mentions is because Rufio, Above Me by Rufio is a song that I've never learned how to play, and I've always tried to learn how to play. It's a very fast song. They're actually from Rancho Cucamonga, I think. They're from the Inland Empire. But I've never been able to figure this song out. And I had one friend back when I was in high school, his name was Sal, and he knew how to play it. And I wanted to learn how to play because I didn't want him to be the only person that knew how to play it, right? I was like determined. Until this day, I still can't play that song. Incubus, Drive, is a song that is 20 years in the making for me. When I first started playing guitar, one of the first songs I wanted to learn how to play was Drive, but at the time it was just a little too complicated for me. And as time went on, I said, I really want to learn how to play that song, but I never sat down to listen to it. And since we're stuck at home right now, I said, you know what? I'm going to sit down and listen and learn how to play the song. It took me 20 minutes to figure the song out.
Nice.
It's the same 4 chords. And I was just like, it took me 20 years to learn how to play this song. So it's not one of the first songs I ever learned how to play, but it's one of the songs I wanted to learn how to play, and I just never took the time to learn it. It always sounded complicated to me, and then when I just sat down and played it, I said, "Oh, this is just in a key of E. This is pretty easy."
You know, the two things I will say, I didn't realize that Rufio sounded that way. I don't know why marketing is important. I just picture them to be some less aggressive sounding. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then a lot of the, are they a pop punk band? Is that a pop punk band?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
A lot of the pop punk, that's one of the conundrums for me. It sounds super aggressive, but then sometimes like what they're saying is not super aggressive. But this one had like really like almost blast beats and like really heavy distortion. I'm like, this is Rufio. I was expecting something about like I don't know, like going on a date or something. I don't even know what the song was about. But either way, and then Incubus, man, they were another band that came out of that era of. They're not like a new metal band, but they came out of that era. That first album kind of was that Science.
Yeah.
Interesting, man. Interesting.
Yeah.
Let me
How about you? You got some honorable mentions?
My two honorable mentions are going to be Basket Case by Green Day. Only because that is the song and that is the video that made me want to learn to play the drums. Is seeing that video and seeing Tré Cool play the drums made me go, I want to play that instrument. And obviously it was actually the first record that was not like a child's record that I bought. Mm-hmm. My mom's boss bought it for me and was like concerned that it wasn't in the children's section of Tower Records or wherever he bought it. Because before that, it was all like Weird Al records and like the soundtrack to Ninja Turtles 2. And then my other honorable mention is Rock the House by Gorillaz. Because it's the first like rock-oriented song that I learned how to play. And it made me fall in love with syncopated hi-hats and funky drumming. And has made me search out being able to play in non-rock oriented band stuff where there's like a really deep pocket and groove.
Yeah.
As a drummer, man, that's just the funnest shit to play, man. It really is.
Yeah. Even as a guitar player, there's always more room for improvement, right? I feel like for a long time I had hit a plateau and I've stuck to the same things, and I would end up writing the same sort of things and composing the same sort of music. I said, it's time for me to step away from what I'm comfortable with and start heading to a different direction, So it's very important. Yeah. So I totally understand why Rock the House would be influential for you.
The Gorillaz in general I'm sure we'll get into them in a different episode, but the Gorillaz are just a big deal to me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They're the self-titled is amazing, but I feel Demon Days is even better. But we'll get into that. I know we're running long, so we'll definitely get into that on a different episode. Let's hop over to our second to last segment here, which is our recommendations. Sorry, I had a brain fart. I was like, wait, what segments do we run on this show again?
No, man, it happens.
Yeah. Excuse me. How about I recommend? I'll go first this time. All I can honestly say, my recommendation is to learn how to play an instrument. That's my recommendation for the show. I want to stay on theme and say, learn how to play an instrument. It's never too late to learn how to play something. I have my brother who's in his 40s started learning how to play the guitar. I have a niece who's learning how to play the guitar. Another niece is learning how to play the ukulele. I have a nephew trying to learn how to play. Two other nephews in their late teens, early teens to learn how to play guitar. It's never too late. Never too late to learn how to play an instrument. I wish if there was something I kept up on a little bit. I know my way around a piano, but I feel like I should have played a lot more piano growing up. But I'm happy with where I'm at right now, I guess. But that's my recommendation for the week, everyone, is to learn, get out there and pick up a bass guitar and a trumpet. That's what I'm missing.
Yeah, man, I guess I was going to have a very similar one. I was just going to say, look, man, whatever you're learning to play, take some time to learn one new thing on it, to learn it right. Over the break, I told myself, or over the quarantine or whatever, what I was trying to say is over like the summer break, I told myself I was going to learn, do my best to learn like the note positions on my fretboard, because I've always just kind of like, oh well, G is here, but like just kind of like know like where is G everywhere on the board, like kind of start figuring that out. So if you do play an instrument, try to figure out like one extra thing to learn on it, like be it a different mode, a different scale, just to get better. So just try to practice every day and do something, like you said, beyond your comfort zone.
Yeah, man. I definitely agree with you. Let's hop over to our final segment, which is the wind down, where we talk about something not related to what we talked about today. Jose, I had an interesting story for the wind down, and I had just realized that I had told you that story at the beginning of the show.
Oh, all right. There you go.
So now I don't have a wind down. I was like, oh, that's a perfect wind down. And then I just realized I was so excited to tell you the story, or very disappointed in myself to tell you the story, that I had just realized, wait a minute, I just ruined my wind down story, because that was my I just introduced you.
Decided to do the intro.
Yeah, so the wind down for me started at the beginning of the show. I think we're going backwards today.
Well, either way, I'll tell you one thing that I finally did. I had been telling myself I'd do this for years, and now I broke down and bought it.
Watch Josie and the Pussycats?
No, I haven't. I'm waiting for COVID to be over so we can watch that with Gabby.
I can't wait.
So growing up, I skateboarded. I was never very good. But I always liked the feeling of cruising. I still have my old skateboard. It's like your typical popsicle twin tail board that I'm going to bust my ass. It's got those like wheels you're supposed to try to do tricks on. But I finally ended up buying a cruiser board, and it has changed my life. It is the funnest shit. Right now, I know we're not supposed to do this because it's supposed to be evergreen content, but that dog face guy, the skateboarding guy, that TikTok video, have you seen this guy?
Yeah, I have.
He's all over the place, man.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, man, riding that thing down the street with like my kids, you can have that feeling. And I get a little bit of just that kind of like vibe, like you're just chilling. I got these big ass wheels on it. I'm not tripping over little rocks. So I'm going to leave everyone with that. Just kind of vibe out for a minute and be that guy for a bit. Just vibe, man. Just vibe.
Yeah. Have you face planted yet?
No, because they've got huge wheels. Here's the thing about, I was always pretty good at cruising. And I know how to fall on a skateboard. Like if I fall to this day, like on my old one, I roll. Like I just automatically go into it. Because growing up, I used to do it so much and I would fall so often that I automatically know how to do it. But with these, it's just got these massive cruiser wheels, these big soft wheels. That all the little like cracks and little like rocks you would totally fuck you up on a normal skateboard. You just kind of roll over them. And it's like the reality is like I'm not jumping over anything. When I grew up in the 90s, having an old fat skateboard like that was like a faux pas. They'd think you were like a poser. But one of two things: A, I don't care. B, that's kind of like the thing now. Like no one's trying to be Tony Hawk, right? Like I'm not trying to jump over rails or do stair sets. Like I just want to cruise down the street with my kid while he's on his scooter.
The only time I want to be like Tony Hawk is when I'm playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
There you go.
And I was really good at that.
You know, I got the remaster, and I remember just being able to do crazy lines. And it's a lot harder than I remember, but I think I'm just getting worse at video games the older I get.
It could be. Could be. I'm scared about my skills in Street Fighter because I haven't played it for so long. And I'm very nervous that my skills have definitely declined.
Well, you know what I mean? There's a reason why those pro gamers end their careers at like 21, 22, 23. Do you remember Adam Sessler from like X-Play?
I do.
He did a whole video when he left. He started a small YouTube channel for a couple years called Revision 3 Games, where he basically did like reviews. And it was some of my favorite stuff because he was like an intelligent dude and actually did like intelligent reviews. But he had a whole video about how he was trying to review a game and he came to a boss that he couldn't beat. And he's just like, I had to have someone else beat it for me. And he's like, am I getting too old? Am I losing the hand-eye coordination? And like a whole thing of like coming to terms with that. But I think the video ended with him talking about how like more and more games have an ultra easy mode now. Because people like you use them almost like stories like you would movies. So like you just kind of want to get through it. And like I
have you caught yourself doing that?
On a couple games, I used to be the guy I'm like, oh, I'm going to put it on hard. But now I'm always on normal. And then there's one of the newer Star Wars games, forgot which one it was. It's called like, I think it's like Fallen Order. It's about that like exiled Jedi. I think it's called Fallen Order. I actually put that on easy. Because I'm like, you know what, dude? Like, I'm not trying, like, I just want to get through this story. I just want to get through this game. I'm not going to like try to get frustrated. I'm not playing with other people. It's a cool story. I'm just going to get through it. I just put it on easy. I'm like, fuck it. Like, I just want to enjoy myself. I am too old and my time is precious. I don't want to spend it frustrated at a video game. If I've only got like an hour to play and I'm trying to get through the story, fuck it. I don't care. You guys can make fun of me all you want.
That's how I play Magic the Gathering now, man.
Dude, it's hard to be competitive. Like,
it's very hard to be competitive.
Like I ain't trying to be the best in the world, man. I gotta unwind for an hour.
Yeah, it's very hard to be competitive. There's so many people out there now, especially that you can play online now, especially for like a TCG game like Magic. It's ridiculous how competitive it gets. Like there's times where I'm trying to play online and I'm playing and I do well. I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm not that I'm a great player, but I do see these lines and the strategies and certain things, right? Like certain lines that when you're playing, depending on the cards you have, and I'm just like, this is it. My brain gets fried so much faster than what it used to be. Like I would be, if I was maybe 5 years younger, I'd probably be able to grind hours and hours on Magic if I wanted to get back to like pro status, but it's just, it doesn't work that way anymore. I'm like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Yeah. I'd rather create. I think that's why a lot of people like in like video game communities, a lot of old pro gamers just make content now for fun. I think that's where it's going. I think video games and any sort of content like that's just going for more fun than having to grind now.
I think there's definitely a line, right? There's that competitive, like the first person shooters and stuff. But then there's a lot of games that are just more like, they should be fun. Games should be fun.
They should. Yeah. I miss the old 2D, man.
Yeah.
I growing up, I wasn't as big as I stuck to Street Fighter. I stuck to a lot of fighting games. I'm a big Street Fighter. As you know, I'm a big Street Fighter guy. So I used to do a lot of Wednesday night fights back in my day. But Jose, it was fun to talk to you, man. This is a longer one, but this is I think it's okay for this one to be a long one.
This is a more introspective one.
Yes,
for sure.
Absolutely. Yes. We do have some plugs, though, before we end the show. So we have 1 more minute to go. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find us?
All right, guys. As always, if you want to find anything about us, you can go to halfstepdownpod.com. It's our website. It's got all the links to our social medias. Episodes are there. Go there for everything about us. If you're on Instagram and Twitter, follow us at halfstepdownpod. On Facebook, look up facebook.com/halfstepdownpod. We are on YouTube. You can find all our episodes on YouTube. Just look in the search bar, Half Step Down Pod, and we will be there. And of course, check out the Spotify playlist. The links are in the description. And then finally, if you like what you hear, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And finally, help spread the word. Use hashtag HalfStepDownPod.
Check it.
Jose, this was a fun one, man. Maybe it wasn't as fun for everybody else, but I had a blast reminiscing about how bad we are at the instruments that we play.
Sometimes you just got to do one for you, man. You just got to do one for you.
Yes, and you know what? Let's be we were selfish today, and I'm okay with it. Yeah. Everybody, have yourselves a good night. Jose, have yourself a good night. And we will speak soon. We'll talk to everybody soon. Take care, everyone.
Yep.
Yeah, give it up for this.